Hello, this is Sheila Bender, and you are listening to In Conversation, discussions on writing and the writing life. Today we have with us in our studio, from Vashon Island, Margie Butcher. Margie is a third-grade teacher at Chautauqua Elementary on Vashon. Margie started teaching in Seattle Public Schools in 2000 after a career in marketing. Since then, the cornerstone of her teaching has been something she created called Action Network that uses project-based learning for her students to learn local activism. Without thinking about it, they regularly have to use their writing skills and critical thinking to create the change they want to see in the world around them. This has included petitions, websites, newspapers, and grants. Their efforts have led to meetings with city officials, TV coverage, and the creation of new programs. And in the process, they learn citizenry, critical thinking, considering multiple perspectives, and empowerment. Welcome to the show, Margie.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I'm glad that we're going to be talking about the ways in which writing matters, starting as early as third grade. It was my daughter who introduced me to you and your work. Her son was in your class years ago at John Stanford Elementary School in Seattle, and my daughter suggested I contact you about your work helping elementary school children write grants for projects they'd like to see happen. So I emailed you about appearing on the program, and you wrote back immediately writing, "Oh my gosh, yes, my third graders just wrote 3 grants last week in Action Network. Perfect timing." Tell us a little bit about it and how you started it and what those 3 grants were and maybe more grants that have been happening since you started it.
Sure. So my first year of teaching, I was teaching first grade in Seattle. Had no idea as a brand new teacher what I really wanted to do and what I wanted to be about. It was right after 9/11. I started to realize that even these young children can make a difference in the world around them. They had sent care packages to a school we found in New York City. It got me thinking about how could I put activism in the hands of these young people.
Can we just backtrack a little? The care package was full of their feelings and emotions about what had happened to other families?
Yeah, some of it was cards, paintings. I wish I had kept copies. One of those things I regret. I was in tears as I looked through everything they made. We did make a class video that we sent where we sang them some songs, and a lot of their emotions were just about, "I'm really sorry, and I care about you, and I hope you get to go back to school soon." Through the lens of a first grader who's saying, "I wouldn't want my school to disappear." It was really quite sweet. And I felt incredibly unprepared for how to help a child through an event like that, like any of us did as individuals, as parents, as teachers. But seeing when they could do something meaningful and real, what it was like for them, got me thinking about what else could I do that's real and meaningful. So that first year, we formed 5 different groups, and I had parent volunteers kind of come in as the coach for each of the groups. Set my sights way too high. Trying to organize 5 groups simultaneously was a bit crazy and fabulous all at the same time. That year, I'd say it was not as writing-based as it became with time. But I remember one of the groups was focused on how to help the environment. And so they went and researched how to find canvas bags that were made from recycled pop bottles, and then got fabric paints and painted these bags with environmental messages and stood in front of a Whole Foods and sold them and took all the money they raised and bought acreage of rainforest in the Amazon.
Wow. Did they write about it at all, about what had happened?
No, and again, that first year I really didn't do a lot of writing. That came more with time. Some of it just naturally that there had to be writing, and some of it realizing how much they processed through
So
the
tell us
writing.
about that. What projects from Action Network had to have writing?
So this most recent one that was happening when you and I had emailed, for the first time, actually, there were grants being written. On Vashon, there's an organization called PI, Partners in Education, and they have a special grant called the Appleford Grant that is specifically for student-led projects. And they like to focus on activism, and they like to focus on the environment. Well, this year we were focusing on how to reduce trash. So it was both at the same time. I had 4 groups of
Down
students.
one.
Yes, exactly. And they're third grade, so they're much more independent. And 3 of the 4 needed money. And so I said, well, if you need money, and they said, oh, we'll do a bake sale. It's like, well, yeah, we could, but there are other ways to get money. Most adults, when they need money for a project, don't do bake sales. And so we talked about grant writing. I had them write the grants completely on their own. I didn't give them any direction other than if something wasn't clear, I might have coached them to say, if I wasn't part of this project, I'm not sure I'd understand what you mean by this. But it had to be completely in their voice, including mistakes.
Did they know what a grant proposal looked like?
Had no idea. Now, because this is student-led grants, it's quite different than an adult grant. It's much smaller in scope in terms of writing, and it's all done online, and there's prompts, and so you're just responding to the prompts.
I see.
For example, one of them, they were writing a grant for what they called Operation Switcheroo. They wanted to make sure that the trash didn't go in the recycling and the recycling didn't go in the trash. So they wanted to buy reusable rubber gloves so every class could have their own pair of gloves to move things into the right spots. And one of the questions is, how would students be involved or for what span of time? All of the kids in the school will be involved. They will move the trash from the recycling and into the trash. We hope the project will go on forever. And they really hope it will go on forever. And we hope it will as well. And so if you walk through the building, there are rubber gloves clipped to all of the trash cans in all the classrooms right now. Most of the classrooms have jobs that the kids do. And so one of the jobs is to put the recycling and the trash out into the hallway bins that they get picked up at the end of the day. But now there's an additional job before you do that to make sure things aren't put in the wrong spot.
Excellent. So they got the grant.
Yeah, all three got all or partial funding. One of the grants was for plastic reusable trays instead of paper trays in the lunchroom. The kids have plastic trays, but the adults get paper trays every day because we don't eat in the lunchroom. And the kids watched this and said, what a ridiculous waste of resources to throw out a paper tray each and every day, every adult in the building. And so part of the grant proposal is they ask what would be full funding and what would be partial funding. Well, this one grant got partial funding. They sent an email out to all the adults in the building to find out how many trays do we actually need. And when they counted it up, there wasn't going to be enough money. Oh. So they sent an email back to the Appleford grant and said, thank you very much. We really appreciate it, but we don't have quite enough money for all the adults in the building. We found a new source for trays. It's less expensive. We also looked at the other two grants in our class, and some of them didn't use all their money. So if we add all that up together, we just need $22 more. And they got the $22. So they were able to get enough trays for all the adults. The kids actually went to every single classroom in the building and hand-delivered the trays to the adults, hand-delivered the rubber gloves to the classroom teachers, hand-delivered the compost bins because there's a composting program. And so they got to present to each class and give the products that were bought to each classroom directly.
What else can you tell us about in terms of grants that they've written? Or I think they've done websites and all kinds of things.
So yeah, another year, my class was studying orcas, which have been on the endangered list for quite a while, and just so sad at what's been happening to the numbers of orcas. And we live on an island, so orcas are really part of our local environment and community. And so they decided to create a newspaper that was all about what's happening with orcas and things that we all can do to help reduce the impact on the environment with orcas. They wrote the newspaper in 2 languages because we have about 12% of our island that speak Spanish. So they were able to get folks whose first language is Spanish to look at their Google translation and make it correct. We had a bilingual newspaper. Every student either wrote or co-wrote an article for that newspaper. Then they sold the newspaper at the local farmers market to raise money. And the money went to an organization called Long Live the Kings, which is about restoring the salmon population. And if you have salmon, you're much more likely to have orcas around.
I'm just shaking my head in astonishment. We think of kids as not staying focused. Kids have incredible focus. They have a real clarity of thinking about certain things, and you're really encouraging a place for that in education.
And what's amazing is some of the kids who really struggled in a traditional writing lesson didn't struggle at all when they wrote their article.
Can you say more about that? That's really interesting.
When you have an audience and you have a purpose, everything we do, including writing, feels different. When someone says you have to do something, for some of us, we'll drag our heels, but we'll get it done. Some people love that thing that you've been asked to do and they're fine doing it. But if you're a student who doesn't love writing yet, when someone tells you, here's your assignment, here's what you're going to write about, here's how you're going to write, here's how long it needs to be, your heart isn't in it. But when you have someone you want to communicate with and something you want to say and you feel passionately about it, you're not even focused on the writing anymore. So even though the writing might still be difficult for you, you find ways to get around it.
Do you have a description of a student who would be a reluctant writer who suddenly wasn't?
Yeah, I had one student in my class who is actually developmentally delayed. And so not only is writing difficult for her, she's about 4 years behind her peers in terms of her academic progress. But the biggest heart and one of the most passionate students in that class. She desperately had things she wanted to communicate. She paired up with another student in class who's very strong writer and also incredibly empathetic and compassionate. And they co-wrote her article together. She was able to get her thoughts across on paper that she might not have been able to on her own.
Did they choose each other to do that, or was that a helpful direction from you?
It was not from me. It was actually the writer came to the student who was the struggling writer and knew she struggled. And we were very honest in our class about how we all have things that come easily and other things we have to work hard at. And so she knew that was one of the things the student had to work harder at. She came up to her and said, "Could I do this with you? Would you like my help? Could we write it together?" Which is much better than me saying, "Please go help this student."
Yeah.
Still, both students felt incredibly fulfilled as writers.
Mm-hmm. Because the one who doesn't write as well had lots to contribute.
Yep, it was her words, her ideas. It may just not have been her spelling, her sentence structure.
And we're talking about third grade here. I mean, I'm listening to and I'm thinking people are hired as ghostwriters, people collaborate on books, people have by an author as told by. There's all kinds of ways in the actual publishing world that people are pairing up.
Absolutely.
And here I'm totally spaced out that this is third graders we're talking about. This is wonderful. So is that newspaper still happening, or was that part of the particular project?
So this is what's hard is I get kids for 1 year.
All right.
And so everything we do is a 1-year project. Some things live on, like websites. The website is still up and running. But some things like the newspaper, you publish it once and then that's it.
Yeah.
The impact continues. And I've had kids come back to me afterwards and tell me with their families or with their friends, they've created their own Action Network projects. Even though the project we did might not have continued, really the lessons learned have continued.
And the confidence that this is worthwhile and they can do it.
And the idea that they can change things in the world is something that most kids
don't have the
believe.
Opportunity. That's why they don't believe it.
You are listening to KPTZ 91.9 FM, Port Townsend. In case you just joined us, you are listening to In Conversation with Sheila Bender, discussions on writing and the writing life. Sheila is talking with Vashon Island Elementary School teacher Margie Butcher about how empowering young students to write grants, rap lyrics, and stories about their activism teaches them critical thinking and how to have a strong voice.
So tell us a little bit about the website. It's for Action Network?
No, it's actually one of the Action Network projects.
Oh, okay.
So their focus that year was plastic. There are 3 third grade classes, and this was the first year that I worked with 2 other teachers, and we worked with all 3 third grade classes. And so we decided as a third grade, we were all going to focus on plastic. There was a very long process of deliberation, of study of about 6 to 8 different ideas among the kids.
Oh.
So we had 75 children who had to come to consensus on what to focus on that year. That process to me is almost as valuable as the end product that they create at the end of the year, because figuring out how do you have other people understand your opinion and be open to changing your opinion is huge. Most of that was done verbally, not in writing, but there's a lot of composition that goes on in your head when you try to explain your thinking, your opinion to a peer. And we do this process where we call take a stand, where the kids will all stand up in a line if you feel very strongly for or very strongly against, for example, focusing on plastic. And then depending upon where you're standing, you get the microphone and get to explain to your peers why you feel that way. And after you've done that, you watch the kids move their position in their line. And we talk about how being open to other perspectives is so important. It's not that you want to just give up your thinking, but you want to remain open to others' thinking. And so just that process is fantastic. Each class had a different focus. That year, my class was focused on how to impact the families Another class was focused on impacting in our school plastic pollution. And the third class was focused on our island overall and our community. So we decided to create a website for families. It was called 22 Ways You Could Help Fight Plastic Pollution at Home. And there were 22 kids in my class that year. They each picked one thing they thought was important to teach people they could do and wrote a section of the website. Along with the sections, some kids produced videos, some wrote songs, some wrote poems. There were some claymation videos. They were incredibly creative, but each had one of the 22 things they wanted to teach people that could be done at home with their family.
So are you going to tell us some of those 22? Do you have any of the writing from that?
I do. One of the sections of the website was called Reuse the Reusable. So it was the idea of finding things that don't have just one use, that can be used over and over. So Reuse the Reusable by William. Did you know that almost 6 million tons of non-durable plastic, aka not recyclable plastic, items the world throws away because they don't know what to do with it? Why should I care? When I learned about this, I was shocked to learn that millions of birds and sea animals die every year because people like you throwing away plastic. And almost every seabird has eaten plastic, like this poor seabird. And he found an image that an artist has done where they found seabirds that had died, and inside of them were enormous amounts of plastics and microplastics. This poor albatross ate so much plastic that it died. Plastic doesn't fill you up. So when seabirds or sea turtles eat the plastic, mistaking it for jellyfish or fish in general, it ends up eating more. It is still hungry, so it searches for more. Can't we leave it? The answer is no. What you may be thinking is, doesn't it break down? Well, yes, but not by the sun or the ocean, because the chemicals plastic is made of is fire-resistant, waterproof, and can take the sun. So it does break down, but after so long of waves crashing down on it, in storms, or cars running it over. Well, I'm here to tell you that you can lower the plastic pollution by 25% if you reuse, reduce, recycle, rethink, and retell. Can I use this for something else? That is a sentence that will change the world. When you're about to throw things away, think again and say to yourself, can I reuse the plastic I'm about to throw away to the trash? Well, you can if you have kids. Or if you know someone else who does. Give them things you don't use anymore, like Legos and broken cell phones, plastic straws too. Reuse the plastic things you don't need to make stuff. Give it to artists for them to use. It'll make a huge impact on not only the environment, but on your own life. What can I reuse it for? Pretty much anything you want. If you remember as a kid, we all wanted to take cardboard and reuse it. My brother still does it, and he's 7. So I encourage you to reuse it. Thank you.
What a strong voice.
I feel like this generation, this younger generation, sees things like separating trash and recycling and compost as just a way of life. Whereas our generation, it wasn't our way of life growing up. So we're trying to adjust. This is all they know.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it has such a great future for future generations as well.
It is a wonderful story. Very direct and very cheerful writing. And
Yes.
really strong voice, like I said. So do you have something else to read to us from these stories?
Yeah, we had another year. This was when I was teaching in Seattle, and the class was focused on trying to clean up the Duwamish River. It was a super fun site. There was a lot of money being put towards it, but they learned that even after all these huge amounts of money and years spent cleaning it up, it would still be unsafe to eat the fish that came out of the Duwamish. They were just enraged that we were not going to get this river back to being a river where the Duwamish people could eat the fish that come from the river. So they decided to do several things. They wrote a rap song and recorded it based on a Macklemore song. They wrote a petition and put it on moveon.org. And then they took all the signatures from the petition, printed them out, went downtown with protest signs, protest at the King County Executive's offices. The local TV station came and reported on this, and we were invited upstairs and got to meet with Dow Constantine and present our petition to him.
And what was the petition for?
The petition was to say we want the cleanup to go a step further. We want to be able to have the river be clean enough that it's not toxic to the people that want to eat the fish from it.
Was that a possibility, that it could become not toxic?
My guess is that it would take not just money to clean it, but a lot of different choices that we make. Being a very urban river, there's a lot near the river that even if we clean it, I worry that I'm not sure we keep up with that
did
level.
they feel a sense of success, though?
They felt heard. And we talked about in the process, when you're trying to create big change, you celebrate the small steps. So they knew that it was unlikely by the end of their year in school, they were going to hear that, yes, we're going to clean it up to the level you're asking. But the fact that they were on the news, the fact that Macklemore's people wrote back to him and thanked them for the rap song, the fact that they actually met with Dow Constantine without having a meeting set up with him was all really big progress, and they felt successful about.
Yeah, and also that when you want something to happen, you really have to start way out there so that it becomes more mainstream. It may get shortened a little bit, but it won't start without the extremes.
And we talked a lot about Plan Bs, that your Plan A rarely happens as Plan A. So you want to have Plan B and Plan C.
Right.
And there's a funny poster we found that, thank goodness, there are 26 letters in the alphabet.
These have all been successes. We have just, with this last comment about Plan A, B, C to Z, begun to broach the subject of disappointment. And writers in the world face rejection all the time. I'm wondering if there were grants proposals that didn't happen, or ways in which the kids had to handle rejection.
Yeah, this year we had 4 projects. 3 were grants, but 1 was not a grant. And the one that was not a grant actually got rejected. They had the idea that when we go down to the lunchroom, they were going to have an incentive for kids to eat all their food. Because as we all know as parents, we pack a big lunch and 3/4 of it comes home with their child at the end of the day. So they really wanted to reduce food waste by having kids eat everything they bring and only bring enough for what they need to eat. And so the idea was, if your tray was clean, you ate all of your food, whether it was a home lunch or a school lunch, you could get to go out to recess 2 minutes early. Not a big incentive, but to a child, it's actually quite a big incentive. So they scheduled a meeting with the principal of the school. They presented their idea, and the principal listened and then said, "I'm sorry, we can't do it." And she explained why. They were quite disappointed. I was equally disappointed. I had really wished it was going to happen. But then after admitting our disappointment and owning it, then we said, so what's the next plan? And they ended up moving to a plan where they were going to weigh the food waste in the lunchroom and have a big graph that everyone could see, so that we could see how much food waste we were having each day, and trying to have that graph show a downward trend.
That's excellent, because it is another way of accomplishing what they wanted to accomplish.
Yes.
And maybe a very much more practical way.
Yes.
And a more educational way for the others.
Yes.
Yeah, really nice.
Maybe
Okay.
not quite as much fun if you're an elementary school age
Right,
student.
right. But that's a lesson
achieves
too.
the objective.
Do you think that your marketing background is feeding into your success with kids in this area?
Much more than I would have expected.
I can hear it. I mean, the graphs and the, just knowing how things work in the world and what influences people, and anything else you want to contribute right now.
Yeah,
about it?
really, Action Network is about project management. Marketing is all about project management. It's taking something that is really huge you want to accomplish and figuring out, how do I get from here to there? Who do I have to involve? How do I have to convince them? How do I manage my time? How do I prioritize my time? What resources do I need? And here they are in 3rd grade and learning all of these incredible adult skills that are needed in almost any career. Even though I use them a lot in marketing, they're used in almost any career that you'd go into. So I feel like they're learning really important 21st century skills through these projects they're doing at Action Network.
Are the kids engaged, do you think, at home in talking about these things and getting some valuable feedback from their parents?
Yeah, I know they are because of the calls and emails that I get from parents. But we also this year decided to try something new, kind of like a science fair. We did an Action Network fair. And we invited families to start their own Action Network project at home, and then invited all 3 3rd grade classes in and had the families present to the 3rd grade what they're doing at home. I think it was 6 or 7 projects that were presented this year. And for our first year, I felt as a great start. But we're really trying to have this be a way of being, a way of looking at the world around you, and a way of empowerment that isn't just a school-based project, and it's not just a 3rd grade project.
Along those lines, one of my most important questions for you is, has this project incurred writing that you have to do? Have you been writing because of it?
Some, but not a lot.
Well, tell us about the little.
Yeah, the little happens every once in a while to be something that really needs to be adult level communication. I try as much as I can to have everything be from the students. A, because they're the ones who are there to learn. B, because I think their voice gets heard more than mine as an adult. But every once in a while, there'd be something that really needs to come from me, whether it's a communication between me and my principal, or this year I sent an email to the editor of our local newspaper to see if we could get coverage.
Right.
But it was a very short time period, so I didn't have time for kids to go through the writing process.
But has anybody asked you to put this information, these wonderful projects you do, into book form so that other people can learn from you?
My husband regularly.
Yes.
And from you contacting me, it's got me thinking about it.
And the children's voices do not need to be lost in that, because they, just when you read to us their words, that wonderful story about recycling and reusing, their words are really strong and they can be in the book, but they only have a year with you, right? They're not going to be able to put this book together, but you are. And forwards, parent voices, you can have all those voices in the book. And I just want to encourage you, because this is a very, very exciting project. And I think that you can reach more and more teachers and more schools and more kids if you did it. And I know it's sometimes writing a book sounds like feels like a burden, but you have so much energy and so much pep. And these kids have the work that they can allow you to use in the book, and endless ideas. I can imagine a book with an appendix of ideas for other groups to do, and the kids could chime in.
Absolutely.
You know, even though they're leaving your classroom at the end of a year, they are leaving a legacy if they're asked, what didn't we do that we could do? What could other schools do? So I just want to encourage you, because I think writing really matters. I think books matter. The website that you already started could be a place to distribute the book if you didn't do it more widely, but you should do it more widely through educational publishers. There's so much to be done, and I don't want to burden you with yet another huge job, but I just want you to know I really believe in it, and I really believe the kids' voices will live on beyond that year, too, to encourage other people. So I think our time here is just about up. Anything you want to say in parting before we leave?
I didn't know I have one other piece of writing that they did.
Okay.
The group that was focused on the Duwamish River. One piece of what they did is they wanted to write a rap song. And they took a rap song that Macklemore had done, and Macklemore is local to Seattle, and wrote their own version and produced it and put it out on YouTube. And it's called the Duwamish River Rap. It starts with, "Not right, oh yeah. Not right, oh yeah, uh-huh. Not right, the companies are polluting, the animals are dying, the food chains are sighing, the cancer is growing, the people are knowing it's time to stop polluting." And the chorus is, "Here we go back, this is the moment, tonight is the night, gonna help the Duwamish, there's lots of dead fish, so come on and help us, so come on and help us. Come on, King County, make the Duwamish clean enough to let the tribes eat the fish that's healthy. They need it. They eat it to survive, 'cause that's their culture. Yeah, they eat it all the time." I just thought that was a beautiful way to take writing, communicate something they felt passionate about, but bring in their pop culture, music that was meaningful to them.
And technology, YouTube. Yeah, so it's all of a piece, and it's really beautiful. I want to thank you again.
Thank you.
In Conversation is produced by Sheila Bender and edited by Charlie Fleischman.